Hello, I'm the Untitled Builder, and behind me is a shed that I said I was going to build, well, over that way. So the shed is like 98% done. Case in point. So I'm going to show you exactly some of the things that I did wrong and some things that you should look out for when you're building a pallet shed. Think of it kind of like Tool Time with Tim Allen, where he, destroyed stuff. So when it comes to planning out your shed, be sure that you research your local building codes for the maximum size of a temporary structure or shed. Mine was 144 square feet or 12 foot by 12 foot. Pretty simple to find out. Also, when you are trying to find a flat spot. So I originally had said that I wanted to put this behind the kids' swing set. It didn't work out. You see right here that it looks flat. It is not flat. It was off by like a foot from one side to the other. I thought, oh, hey, maybe if I dig a hole, raise up the other side. Doesn't work like that, man. You really, really have to find a relatively flat spot. Now, if you want to make a not so flat spot into a flat spot, you could do a gravel base, which is probably the best way to do it. You could also try digging down a bit. It's a lot harder than you think. Personally, I just recommend finding the flattest spot you can. And like I said, you could also just use gravel. When it comes to scavenging the town for pallets, try to get pallets that are relatively the same size. Now, you can find some that are like 34 by 40, which is kind of a typical size, which is like most of these back here. You can also find 48 by 48. There's the heavy duty blue ones, which are heavy as hell. I do not recommend building the entire shed out of it, but I do recommend that if you can get them the same size as your wall pallets, use them for the floor. You will not regret it. It'll be great for taking any kind of a load if you're putting your yard tractor or any other crap that your spouse decides needs to get out of sight off the lawn or out of the house. Yes, we all have that issue. You're not alone. Like I said, planning this out, you want to get pallets that are all the same size. It'll make your life a lot simpler when you're making the walls. So just remember, when you're making these pallets, you want to have a nailer in the open spots. You're going to see here on the wall here, I have a nailer or 2x4 that I scavenged off another pallet. So I have it on the open ends. I also recommend having another 2x4 as a brace in between the other pallets. I also recommend having a top plate. Additionally, you can have what's called a toe plate or another 2x4 run along the bottom. This will take any of the column 2x4s and allow the wall to have a lot more strength. So when you're building with pallets, you don't want any of the seams to line up. It's a big no-no because any loads that hit it will cause it to buckle. Case in point, this wall over here. I actually put this piece of plywood to brace because it is crooked. So it's kind of a little hard to see now that I've hit it with the trim, but right here is where it bows out. So why does it bow out? Well, here's another tip. Do not start this in the late fall or any kind of a rainy season, because you're going to be out there working and all of a sudden, oh crap, it's going to rain next week. Let me cover it with the tarp. And then it doesn't stop raining, or it doesn't stop snowing, in my case. It snowed, see? The snow seems to be on and off, and I've decided I'm just going to suspend the shed operation, and the weight of the snow on the tarp will pull the walls down because you haven't built the roof yet, and the seam that you put in and you forgot to put a column in, the whole wall will start to cave in like this, and you'll get a bow in the wall. It's not great, man. And the best thing you can do is either A, rebuild it, which I should have, but or B, build it right. Now when it comes to the foundation, I used a lot of cinder blocks because I had them laying around. So what I really wanted to use was those nice truncated pyramids that they have at Lowe's, not Home Depot for some reason, but the one at Home Depot has the 4x4 post hole, whereas the ones at Lowe's have the post hole along with the, it's like a 2x slot on either direction to allow a, a beam to go in there so you have support for a porch or a shed. That's the ones you should be using. The other ones are more for columns, where as the ones at Lowe's are meant for sheds. Get those. They're worth the $6, and it doesn't lift the shed up that high. And even if it does, like I said before, you can bury it a bit. Like I said about the flooring, you don't want to have seams, but if you do have seams on the floor, I used 3/8 bolts that went through the 2x4 members of the pallets. I also have some 2x4s run the entire length of the floor to give it extra rigidity. I also have the 3/8 bolts going through there. The 2x4 nailers, I did 2 3/8 bolts, and the pallet sides, the ones that have the little crooks for the forklifts, I did 1 bolt per thicker part, the part that didn't have the forklift hole. And it really strengthened it up. Like, I shook it and it did not move. It was solid and heavy. Try to have a friend when you're putting that together, because doing it yourself, trying to prop it up, major nightmare. And it's just heavy as hell. So, the Oddnight Builder is a scavenger. You know this, you've seen my stuff. Obviously, I built a shed out of pallets, so of course. Anyway, when it comes to scavenging the plywood, try to get stuff that's 4x8. If not, try to cut it down to the 4x4 measurements, or anything that's like a multiple of 2 or 4. Reason being is that if you make your floor in multiples of 4, which I recommend, it's just a lot easier for measurements. When you have your seams lay on these pallets, you want to have something to nail to. You don't want 2 budding sheets of plywood to have nothing to nail to. And in the future, when that wood is older and wet and just crumbling, you don't want to have a foot through the floor incident. Now, that did not happen here, but it's happened to me on a roof, and I fell through the roof. Not fun. So now on to the walls. When it comes to the walls, try to make them as straight as possible. So when you have the pallets here, it's a little easier, especially if you have the 2x4 columns, to nail them together. It makes life a lot simpler. When it comes to anything that's built out of 2x4s, like I did back here, the reason why I actually built this out of 2x4s is because I want to put some cabinets on there, and I wanted to have a better nailing surface. Also, when you are building your walls, I took the total height of what my roof was going to be, which in this case was 8 foot, and I just incorporated it into the wall and lifted up the wall that way. This allowed me to have a better idea of where my wall height was going to be as far as the roof, and also when you do 8 foot, the sheathing is sold in 4x8, makes it a little easier to cut. Now, as far as the sheathing, I went with a nice 4x8 primered T111. So you see right here, it's really nice to work with, a little heavy, but having it primered means that you do not have to paint it anytime soon. You can take your sweet time, work on other projects, maybe, save some of the money and, buy the paint later, make it a little easier on your budget and, the bank account, whatever. So when it comes to actually attaching it, I used these primered screws. They have a Torx head, and I used an 1.5 one. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 5/8. But you want to get the primered ones because they won't rot, and not something you want to have happen to something that is attaching sheathing to your shed. So the sheathing was pretty much the only parts I really bought, besides the roof, obviously. But when it came to the trim, now the trim was fun. I used scrap wood. So when you're using scrap wood, you all know it's going to be not the best lengths and sizes. So what you do to compensate for that. You cut the 45-degree angle like this, and you have it butt together. Now, this one dried up a bit, but you want to have it so that when the rain comes down, it doesn't go in if it was going the wrong direction. So, for instance, if this was like this, the rain would be dripping down in here, and you'd get mold and all the other crap that comes with wet wood. So that being said, you also want to primer your trim at the very least. If you don't, it's going to age rather fast, like this piece right here. I didn't primer it yet because I'm not really sure I want to go with that. I'm not really finished trimming the whole thing because, well, I don't even have that one wall yet. As someone has mentioned, it looks like a corn crib. Yeah, I guess if you're really old and know what a corn crib is, it does look like one. Whatever. The point is, get your trim primered and done. This way, you have it all done. You don't have any little air holes or anything like that. So, roofing. My roofing took a long time. I recommend get all the parts and then do your roofing in like 1 to 2 dry days. The problem is I didn't do that. I took a little bit of time. I went with Pallet, P-A-L-R-U-F. I got the clear panel for what will eventually have a solar panel or two to help charge lawnmower batteries when the lawnmower is in here. If you don't know, my lawnmower has a drip charge battery on it. I also liked the wavy design of Pallet. It's great if you have a standard shed roof, which is like this, and no gable, which is, well, what mine is, a triangle. Gable roofs, Pallet won't work. You want to go with Sun Tough. It has the angular design, and the reason I'm saying to do this is because of ridge caps. For some reason, they say, oh, Pallet has ridge caps. Yeah, you can't buy them anywhere, and if you look on every forum, they say, yeah, there's no ridge caps, but they advertise it. I don't know why. So this nice little product of Israel has no ridge caps. I recommend, if you're going to do a gable roof, go with the Sun Tough. If not, and you're doing a shed roof, go with Pallet. So as far as the ridge, I went with the old metal ridge I happen to have from one of the old vegetable gardens that we had, and I repurposed it for this ridge. Not the most ideal. There was a lot more screwing in, and it was just a giant pain in the butt. So when it comes to making your roofing members, so traditional roofing, you do what's called a bird's mouth. Basically, you have the member come down like this, and you have a little 90-degree angle cut into it, and that way the weight of the roof falls on the wall, and you have a little overhang. It's cute and all. It's hard as hell to actually make. I tried several times, and when you have a finite amount of wood for your roofing, which I actually had to buy that roofing because I did not have long enough pieces, it's not the best thing to do. So if your roof is actually shallow enough, which mine is, I used hurricane straps and forewent the bird's mouth. Now if you see behind me, this piece right here, yeah, that's where the bird mouth was, and it's just didn't end up right. So I had to jack it up a bit with some cutoffs, and then I used the hurricane strapping, which is this strapping right here. It goes down this way and then turns 90 and then attaches to the wall. I also used this right here, which is actually angled down for roofing. So this is actually meant to do this. I went with a 3/4 inch screw. You could do a 1 inch, but just remember, this is only like 1.5 inches thick. If you put too many screws in here, you're going to rip the piece of wood apart. So when it comes to roofing, if you do a solid roof, you know, you don't really have to have these purlins that I have up here. These purlins are mainly only for this kind of corrugated roofing. So when it comes to these purlins, You can use a 1x3, which is what I did. It's relatively cheap. You can get 2x3s. It's just all a matter of what you're willing to pay and what kind of meat you're going to be screwing into for strength. Um, Also remember that the distance on most corrugated roofing for purlins is 24 inches. Now, you can get away with like 30, which is what I did right up here because the width of the ridge cap that I had was a little narrower than what I wanted, so I had to extend it. I think it's like 28 inches. It'll work. It's at the top. Most of what's there is going to slide off anyway. Just remember, you don't want to go much further than 30 because it's just plastic roofing. It can take some abuse, but not a lot. The same can be said about the metal. The metal is not much thicker than what the plastic is. So just keep that in mind when you have a foot of ice and snow on top of these things, that it's not always going to move very fast. So you want to make sure it has a strength that is prescribed for it. Now, when it comes to attaching this roofing, so if you read the instructions, they say, oh, have everything laid out and pre-drill where it's supposed to go. Sure, if you're living in perfection world where everything is all nice and done by a professional, which even the professionals screw up. So just pop that bubble of a dream already. So what I do is I put up a panel at a time. I put the little closure strips that are on each one of my purlins here, which looks exactly like the outline of the roofing. It's made of a hard plastic, and I used 3/4 and 1-inch screws that had a nice size head on it. I went with a pan head as opposed to a button head because I didn't want the round interfering with the actual roofing. The varied lengths I ran out. So I had to get a different one. They didn't have 3/4 inch, so I went with the 1-inch. When it came to this, it didn't matter. It's just going to hold it in. I recommend going every other purlin bump on the closure strip. So doing this will add strength when the wind is coming at you. So when you're designing a roof, make sure you have an idea of where the wind is coming from mostly. So I have mine going in a northwesterly position. So the gable is facing like this. If you, the observer, are northwest, you're looking at my gable roof like this, and this is how it looks. The reason you do that is because if you have it facing this way, the wind will pick up on your overhang and start to lift up your roofing, and you'll lose your roofing, no matter how many freaking screws you got in. So it's not the best idea to face it that way. Always have the gable facing the windward side. So when it comes to this plastic roofing, one thing it actually says in the instruction book is to not cover it with a tarp. And you'd think, oh, overnight it's not going to be too bad, which is true. But let's say you do that for overnight, and overnight turns into a week of rain. Well, now you have a problem, because in between that rain it's going to be hot, and this is what happens. Your roofing will deform. Don't be me. Don't do that. Pick the 2 dry days and just put the damn stuff up, or you're going to end up with deformity like that, which now I have to put trim up here and pop it out like that. Now, for me, it kind of works because it's the windward side, and it actually closes any gaps that are right there, and I don't have to worry about rain coming in. And the same can be said about here, which I'm going to have trim up there, and it's going to work out fine. So about the roofing. Now, you see here, I have the wall go all the way up. You want to have the eaves built first and sheathed first before you do the rest of the roof. Why? Because if you start doing the roof, it's going to be a giant pain in the butt to have to cut the sheathing afterwards. Did this, it stinks, and I have a spot up here that I now have to fix. Well, I have to cut a piece for. Luckily, I have plenty of scrap now. Also, when it comes to your sheathing, make sure that you lap it correctly. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with pieces that don't match And if you make it an odd size, like mine is 11'6", you're going to have to find a 6-inch piece that you have cut off from another one that matches the lapping. The lapping is where you have an over and an under. They lap together with T111, and you don't have it right, you're going to have to cut another piece. Don't do that. Make it square, like 12 by 12, 10 by 10, something where you're not going to have to worry about laps. So don't do that. So if you haven't done a Power Roof or Sun Tough roof before, might I recommend that you probably shouldn't do a opaque one like I did. Now I actually have some experience in doing this. I did a clear one and a slightly opaque one. They do make one that is heavily tinted, which will block UV, but at the same time let the light in. So if you don't have electricity, like this one does, you'll still have some light going in, but you won't have stuff get UV burned or sun damaged. So the reason I say this is because when you're putting on the panels and trying to screw in, it's very hard to figure out where you have to put the screw in. And by the way, you get one shot. Because what happens now, if you put the hole in the wrong spot, you have a hole in your roof. And you're going to have to caulk it up or some other means. Not great. Did that several times. So my recommendation, what I did is doing one panel at a time, I reached under, felt where the purlin was and where the spacer was, felt that, and then I put pressure on the roofing from above, and then I felt with my finger, felt where the strip was, and then I put the screw on. Sounds a little complicated, but once you start doing it, just as I said it, you'll go, oh wow, that was easy. Also, when it comes to the overlaps, do not screw all the way to the overlap. Do at least one set prior to the overlap. Because the roofing, you want to have one over and then one under, the over being on the windward side and the under being on the leeward side, which is the non-windy side. When it comes to screwing these in, I did every other wave or crest. So I did this because I felt it'd be stronger, because we do happen to have a lot of wind, and the direction that this is in has very little trees. So I wanted to have enough strength. So like I said, save some space on where the overlap is, so you can put so you can put the next panel under, and two, when you're trying to screw that overlap, you just lift up the overlap and you can see where the last purlin strip was, and you just kind of drag your finger down as you're putting the overlap down, and you now have an idea of where to screw in. It's a lot easier. It takes a little finesse and practice. Like I said, I recommend, if you haven't done it before, using either a clear or a UV protected one so you can see what you're doing. You'll get the practice, you'll get perfection eventually. I'm not even there yet, so no worries. Probably wondering why I have such a huge overhang. So the overhang is mostly, see this clear panel here? I'm going to have a solar panel there. I want to have it there instead of the inside, because if you have it on the inside, it blocks some of the light that you want. And where's the fun in that? So this way, here, I can at least have the solar panel, and it's not going to block my light. It's going to be on the outside, so I don't have to worry about it. And it'll be somewhat built in. I'm going to try to have something in here. Probably a mesh or, I don't know yet, something. But this is my pallet shed, and hopefully you gleaned some glimmer of what you should not be doing, what you should be doing. And if you have any questions, put it in the comments. If you like my video or any of my other videos, please subscribe. I know I haven't been on in like 8 months. Sorry, lots of things are happening. That's the life of a parent. Anyway, like I said, if you like my videos, please subscribe. And till next night, I'm the Oddnight Builder.